Okay, great.
Looks like it's good.
All right, great. So what happened last week? Actually, we have gone through. Maybe if you can promote me to be a presenter, I can bring up the presentation I've gone through last week as well. Very quick recap and.
You good? You should be.
All right. All right. And okay. So what we have done last week, Larry, we have announced the new Jira Ecord, and where I did populated some actually all of the objectives you shared with us, plus the additional tapping mirroring epic objective. I've added that too, and we just updated the wiki with the Slack links and mailing lists, everything to the pages where it makes sense. So right, let me go to the wiki. Okay, so this is the new look of the analytics core wiki pages, where I have added the Ecord high-level objectives in here, and for which I have added Jira links to the Jira epics and issues, and as well as a quick indication of what's ongoing and what's pending, and to be able to give a quick idea. And during last week's meeting, we also decided to have requirements in this fashion. So I've added this draft requirement page to reflect the current status of the requirements for the next releases of Ecord. And as well as we talked about the potential use case proposals, especially for the next 3 months, especially for the MWC Americas, September this year. And I've added this zero-touch use case proposal that we were working with together with Tom on this topic. So this is the status of where we are actually. In terms of if we can go one by one with the high-level view of the high-level objectives. So we are now concentrated into 3 of these objectives. One of them is to have Ecord up and running, and we're making progress on that, slower than we expected at the beginning, but hopefully we're doing good progress. We also had some discussions with Andy, and he provided us with useful documentation and useful recommendations, such as to have local development environments, to have Ecord migration work to be done, instead of trying to set up Ecord in a box, the whole big thing. Because if I go into the details of this work, because Ecord is right now needs to be migrated in 2 different perspectives. One is the new build system. The other one is the new XOS data models. And this new XOS data models thing requires the synchronizer code to be updated, to be migrated. And so we will be able to start that work this week, as we managed to have the local development environment set up correctly last week. And so we look forward to have it get started this week.
So
yeah,
just a quick side thing, and maybe you were going to come to this, so apologies. But do you have what we plan to do with Ecord, which as an Mcord, but Ecord I think will be the first one there, is to do what is likely to be a 3.0.1 release in somewhere in a couple plus weeks after the May 15th release of 3.0. Is that something that seems like you might be in that time frame as well? Or, I mean, they don't have to be synced up, but if we could get both A and Ecord released with an incremental release in a couple of weeks to a month out, that would be a good thing, I think.
Like, I mean, roughly speaking, when would you expect these to be done? Like mid June or late June?
No, actually, well, maybe at the latest, I think mid June, and we can do these separately. It's just that Ecord, first of all, we did not want to hold 3.0 the platform up on the different solutions being up to date, because they, of course, would have to follow the platform a little bit. But Ecord seems to be making really good progress, and it could be as little as the end of May, or as early as the end of May, 2 weeks after the release. It might slip out to a month. I was just trying to get a sense. I mean, there's no fixed deadline, but I was just trying to get a sense if you had any targets like that.
Yeah, we can at least try to achieve that. Actually, this is what our plan. I mean, this is priority 1 for us, and we have Mahir in Istanbul and Aydın in Istanbul, and myself. Some of us 100% dedicated to this. We'll be working on. So to be more specific, if we may follow this.
Good.
Oh, sorry. Like we have actually created some tasks under these epic. So let me find the correct epic and so that I can follow it. So migration of the monitoring service to the XOS data models and migration of the monitoring service to the new core build system are all assigned to Aydın and myself and Mahir. So we are like we got it started though. So
good.
I think we should be able to deliver that.
That's great. So just we'll keep in sync on that, and I don't know exactly what the timing will be, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that was the intent, was to do some incremental releases with the various flavors of Cord.
Yeah. And okay, let me go back to all right. So the other one we actually are focused on is the requirements, obviously, and we're working with Tom and Sandhya on that. We also have actually investigating some on-app documentation along with OPNFV documentation to get some insights. So this is another one that is ongoing. So let me take this opportunity to also announce that we are seeking people's contributions, people's review and contributions in that area. I feel like the requirements are now quite a draft state, and we need to work on it and and finalize soon. Otherwise, we will not be able to put a roadmap in a healthy way.
So just one high level comment. I absolutely understand the connection to ONAP. It would be good to craft the Ecord requirements and stories so it's not overly intertangled. So for example, while we might borrow the notion of there being multiple control loops, and we can even call them loop 0, 1, 2, and 3, it would be good if we called out, and we believed in our own definition of what those are. And borrowing the ONAP definitions might be perfectly reasonable, but just sort of making it a little bit more self-contained, it would be good to see that kind of material as opposed to just the assumption that if ONAP was doing it, then it was obviously right.
Understand? Yeah, I definitely understand that. I don't know if we have Tom or Sandhya on the call.
Yeah, I'm on the call, Bora. Yeah, sure, Larry, we got it. So I think what Larry is asking us to make sure that whatever we do is independent of any orchestration, such as ONAP. So we'll do that, Larry, and we'll describe from our definition what loop 43210 means, and then we'll sort of going to also expand on it to say that loop 2 and 3 could be also equivalent of what DCAE provides. We can sort of reference that as well.
Yeah. The links to ONAP are great, and just kind of from a you got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. I understand your point, really. So maybe we can work on some new terminology and
well, it's not even important that it be
the framework and everything.
It's not important if it makes sense to use the same terminology. That makes life easier for everybody. I just want to make sure that, let's think of it this way, that this document be self-contained might be a simple way of putting the objective, that we understand. I mean, there are some definitions here. I don't know where that picture came from for sure, but
that picture actually is I draw it after a whiteboard drawing of Tom and Sandhya. This is this is what we have produced on our own.
Got it. Thanks. So it would also be good then. So I think what the challenge, and this is, I'm maybe just picking around the edges of the central challenge here, which is understanding how the existing Ecord architecture, which just for example doesn't use L0 through L4 terminology, how those two things align, and it doesn't use the terminology SD collectors. Is that essentially the same as the monitoring service, or are we now adding a richer description where there's multiple levels of collectors? That might make sense.
Yeah. It is in fact, Larry, that's the case. This is much richer. We assume that obviously we may have our own definition of collectors, and there may be NFVs or even hardware level, or people who are in physical network, they might have their own collectors that we might have to discover and be able to configure, etc. So as long as there are assumptions that there are multiple collectors, and we want to be able to, as long as they're software defined, programmable, and is discoverable, and we can coordinate dynamic collection from it, that's sort of the intention.
Yep, good. So I think a litmus test of sorts as to how well these things are integrated, it would be being able to say, and now we will take on the task or the story or the epic on the implementation side to build out, in the context of the running code, one of these boxes on this picture. So that the mapping from requirement onto the implementation, which will continue to change, of course. It's always a moving target, but the mapping from the requirements onto the implementation, and you can see where the gaps are, and then we can talk about, how do we want to fill that gap? Can we find someone else that has a solution here? We can plug it in, and so on.
Sure, absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
Yeah, and another action item from last week's meeting was to work on use cases, and I've added this zero-touch use case proposal. What we originally started with Tom a couple of months ago to target MWC Americas, and yeah, it's a quite long list of.
And I think as part of that requirement, Larry, we have the zero touch is also being looked at for the multi-access core, potentially a platform that zero touch is part of that requirement, that we can instrument it, and we don't have to send a truck roll for these edge solution deployments, deploying services, or doing diagnostics remotely, and so on. So those are all part of the zero touch operational examples that we need to.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering how. So zero touch. All right. So there's ONAP assumption. Zero touch is broader than just monitoring. Monitoring is clear, and analytics is clearly an important piece of it. There are other people interested in the general question. I'm trying to figure out how we can, make.
I'm not sure.
There's other people interested in the general question of what's the relationship between ONAP and Cord, and because of DCAE, there's a very tight connection to Ecord. How do we make room for the more general problem? Or what I'm a little concerned about is that Ecord becomes and maybe this is the right thing to do, becomes the stand-in for the ONAP Cord interconnection, and it's much broader than analytics. So I'm trying to figure out how we should approach that.
By the way, zero touch is not part of the ONAP thing. This zero touch is something that we discussed here, and of course, they might have also the same goals, but ONAP doesn't call for zero touch in anywhere that as far as I'm concerned. But for the multi-core access, zero touch seems to be a requirement that Al Blackburn brought to one of the board meetings.
So multi-access is a big deal across Cord, and of course it involves analytics and it involves all the flavors in some sense. Right. It's going to be at least M and R, and likely even E, and of course all of it needs analytics. So this zero touch use case proposal is almost becoming a placeholder for a very high level Cord requirement, not just an Ecord requirement. So how do we approach that in I don't know.
Yeah, Larry, as I see it, actually, in the assumptions list here, the one that I just highlighted is quite out of scope of Ecord, the service onboarding.
So it can make an assumption. It could make an assumption that you have that capability, and then how do you build on it?
Exactly. So so this is just not part of the Ecord work. It's just an assumption. But the other two assumptions will be part of Ecord's work, I guess. And
let me add to what Bora is trying to say. I think what we have, Larry, is that if we can control the behavior of these data collectors from the SDN or from the higher level control, those collectors are primitives that enable zero touch. So the dynamic programmability of these data collectors provide information in different loops that enables application to make, policy decisions or load balancing decisions, handoff decisions, and so on. I think that's sort of where we are going with zero touch, or, service dynamics and all of that can be based on what collector can provide as a dashboard, as a state information collectively. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you got zero touch controller, or I'm sorry, zero touch collectors and monitoring and so on.
Right. So these collectors, if we can sort of be able to program them to sort of say what to collect, when to collect, how to create, capture the metadata, how to, basically atomically bring those information up to the higher level collectors or higher level engines. And those information are the ones who would enable load balancing apps or optimization apps or things that are required per se, for zero touch operation.
Okay, so I'm just looking for advice on a very related question, which, like I said, there are other people that are interested in ONAP, and they're asking, how do I get the ONAP Cord interface? And they're asking, how can they get involved? Funneling all of that into Ecord doesn't seem quite right, but there's such a significant part of an Ecord that I'm not sure it makes sense to create a separate discussion either. So I'm just looking for guidance on the right way to make progress across the board.
Maybe start in Ecord, and then after some progress, and if we see, if the context gets enlarged too much beyond the DCAE and policy, we can carve out a part of it and make it another.
Okay, so that's good. That's good. So what the storyline could be for a while. DCAE is a very fertile place for looking first. Go join Ecord, contribute there, and the more experience we gain, we can generalize and grow it. But being very focused at first is a good thing. So let's go focus on DCAE and Ecord.
Okay, great.
I like that. I like that approach. Not to preclude anyone from looking more broadly. People will, do whatever they want, but from a kind of as a group, that could be our approach.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, I think this concludes the from my part regarding the status of the work.
So how about Ixia and Ereg? We talked to Ereg as well. He had his tapping concept that he said he wants to bring up and all of that. How do we get this? Is Ereg on the call, or we should probably make sure he is? Oh, is he?
We also have Alex from Mariner, I believe, on the call.
Yeah.
So there's actually quite a few other folks that Tom, I'm not sure you're aware of, that are interested in participating.
Yeah, I am actually. I just don't know how to really get them engaged, or if we can. Now that we have this Scrum Master tasks defined, maybe they can go in there and either create their own tasks, or they can add or maybe assign one of these tasks to themselves, or collaborate with others.
Yeah.
Or assigned to this.
Yeah, hi Larry, and the group for Mariner endpoints. So basically, that's exactly what we're looking at, is to basically take one of these tasks and just claim responsibility for it and provide you with the updates as we go along. We're planning to start either later this week or early next week.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. Thanks.
So, yeah, that sounds great. Then, so Ecord 14, as it seems. Would you like to volunteer for this?
Well, they certainly. I don't want to discourage that. I thought that someone else had been working on that, though. Although maybe it didn't claim there.
So maybe this is the packet mirroring using.
Okay, so
was it who's the guy? Areg was working on that, wasn't he, from Ixia?
Yeah, I thought it was
Ixia. Ixia.
Okay, so yeah.
So maybe we should assign that to Ixia, and then.
And first, we need to create an epic here, and.
I mean, under the same epic, we can create more tasks, right?
All right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Epic is the more a bigger story, and task are
Okay.
the little things that has to happen. Or okay. So where is I guess Alex? Where is Alex located at? Is he local or?
We're in Canada. Time zone is between, well, several time zones, but mostly Mountain Time and Atlantic Standard Time.
Okay. So Alex, are you able to maybe replicate what we have here with the Ecord, at least the baseline, and then we could maybe start thinking about creating one or two collectors where collectors can also create their own workers, and workers can basically tap into information or add the counters or create metadata. Should we maybe start thinking of that approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So let us organize and we'll reach out.
Okay, so if you don't mind, send an email, Alex, to one of us. I think we have. You have Alex's email address? So
let me check.
Yeah, or just Alex, go ahead and send an email to Bora and CC me or Larry, and then maybe we can have a offline discussion to go to over the detailed tasks, that you may be interested in, contributing.
Okay, let's do that.
So not to get process heavy, but are you planning sprints of any kind of particular cadence?
Yeah,
we're bootstrapping, and that's always a little tricky to do. But it would be good to think in terms of what's the next release, and the whole nine.
Definitely. I think what I'm going to do, Larry, that's a good point. So I think what I was hoping, Larry, to do maybe after the baseline Ecord, the broken Ecord is fixed and all of that, we all agree this is our baseline. Then we could, create the first sprint would be, can we go introduce a, couple of collectors or another collector that could be, in parallel work with our collector, with Ceilometer, Monascas collector, and can we program these two? And that could be our first sprint.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. On sort of architecturally on this notion of a collector. So there's two different ways of looking at this. One is that we call it Ceilometer, and I really hesitate doing that because it immediately narrows people's notion of what it is, that it's purely an OpenStack thing, and that's not true. Are you imagining these collectors, Ceilometer, the current monitoring service collector being one of many, or do you imagine collectors plugging into that general purpose framework?
Yeah, I'm imagining, that could be one of many, and then, we could decide how we can link these collectors together. Who is the supervisor, has a supervisory control as a collector that receives the other collectors, and then, or maybe, how collectors can communicate to one another eventually, in a structured way.
So a cornerstone of the Ecord monitoring service architecture to date is that there is a funneling thing that happens.
Yes.
And that thing formally called Ceilometer is that framework piece into which we want to bring, so that you communicate by plugging into that. So I can absolutely imagine there being hierarchies of collectors. And so let's just take Volt as an example. It has an entire rich subsystem that monitoring service need know nothing about, and it collects together, and then it feeds into this central collector. The second you move away from there being a central collector, or root collector, whatever you want to call it, and you start having peer collectors, then you've just recreated that problem, and you're still going to have to come back and solve it. So.
Good point. I think, Larry, the notion here is that, DCAE, for example, is a data lake and is a sort of a bigger aggregated collectors, and then Ceilometers or maybe, Ecord collectors could be at the edge of the network, and they may have to feed into some other aggregator before they even feed into the DCAE collector, for example. That's what I'm thinking. But even they might not even tie to the DCA collector. They might tie into something of them, Ceilometer maybe where the things stops. So given given that, this whole loop 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, they basically, we could describe those and then come up with a notion that how, at every loop there may be some notion of a collector that can feed into higher layer collectors and so on.
So having a hierarchy of collectors makes sense. I think what I'm driving towards, and I need to do a better job of articulating it, is that at the cord pod level, that we come up with a funnel, a place that all data goes through. The access control gets applied to that. It's not going to keep you from pushing your data through that narrow waist and finding your ultimate source, or I'm sorry, your ultimate consumer. But it is I'm just really concerned that we end up with a fragmented set of collectors, and so I want some kind of unified control over that at the pod level, at least.
Right. So Larry, one thing that is especially for Ecord that we've been thinking about, what if we had, RAN level collectors that, the policy made, for example, might tie to that layer 0 or loop 0 versus loop 1, loop 2. And loop 0 is maybe like in milliseconds, loop 1 maybe in seconds, and loop 2 maybe minutes, and 3 maybe hours, and higher level, right? So depending on what applications who need millisecond control, they might tie themselves to the loop 0. If applications they need at minute level policy changes, they might collect to loop 1. And that doesn't mean that when you tie yourself to loop 0, information will get lost. You always report it up, but somebody can make decisions in a millisecond level versus minutes and hours and so on. But I'm sure all of them are necessary, for zero.
I'm sure. I completely believe that. Maybe what I'm arguing is that collectors are good, and all of the arguments you've made of them being at different levels are exactly right. What we need is a collector framework.
Yes.
Because the situation I'd like to avoid is this, where these things always end up if you're not careful, which is you have a bunch of siloed producers and consumers of data. And I would like a kind of, call it a framework, call it a clearinghouse, something of that ilk, which is, again, part of the way that Ecord monitoring service was originally designed. I'm not arguing we have to stay with exactly that, but having as a requirement that there is a clearinghouse / plugin framework for collectors seems like a good thing.
Okay, so let us take an action item. Boro and I and Santia maybe will come up with this, basically the framework of these, collectors, and maybe, how, we make sure that they are independent as well as, if somebody decides to tie them together, at least they have an option, in a sense. And then how maybe come up with a couple of use case examples of application type 1, 2, 3 that may sort of have a need for different loops and different collector types.
Sure. So simultaneously allowing for that variability and bringing these, that autonomy of individual collectors into a common framework so that they're all accessible from all levels, if you had good reason to, sounds like the right high-level requirement.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, let us go on the whiteboard. And then we just haven't had a chance really to detail it out.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm sorry. So that was a bit of a diversion, but wherever you are now.
No, that's good. I think that's us. So I think that the point is now, Larry, we need to get our resources on board, and then we can more of work as a team, and we need to sort of get Alex and Arek from Ixia, and I'm not sure who else. Maher, of course, he's on board.
Yeah.
And
I as well.
And then if we have summer interns that we could borrow from Bill, we could probably put them to work too.
So the other interest, and I don't see anyone online, but maybe I'm missing it, is Calyx. But I don't think there's anyone online. Just as a source of people that have expressed interest.
Calyx.
Sashin.
Sashin is
yeah.
you should contact him.
Sachin. Okay, so maybe you have his email address probably, right? Bora?
I should have it, yeah.
So
Yeah, it's sachin.vasudeva@kellex.com. So,
if not,
I should have it. Sorry,
Okay.
just a second.
okay, yeah, we'll reach out to Sachin, and then maybe bring him up to speed and make sure we bring him to the team. You know where Sachin Calix is located at, Bill?
I want to say North Bay.
North Bay? Oh, that's good. So we can.
North of Marin.
Who's local is great. Relatively.
Kind of local, yeah.
Once a day, once a week. Okay. So anything else from Alex or anybody else, Larry, that we should maybe? Is this Song Yu is on the call? Or Maher, do you have anything?
Tom,
David?
little comment. If you can start on this requirement page, start to make some definitions first. For example, what does a loop mean? What's a collector means? So what does a collector do? And so we can talk in same language and understand each other.
Okay, sure. Definition of collectors, loops, and interfaces, and maybe inner working relationship links and all of that. Collector links and so on. Okay, that's a great idea. I'll take the task on that.
Thank you.
Gabe, any other comments? Song Yu?
And,
No, I work with
Bora, Tom, and Larry. I think Bora, you wrote some question headers on the Wiki page, so we can add our questions about these requirements, and anybody else can add questions about these requirements. So we can.
This is Slack?
No, this is Wiki.
Okay, so we also have
So
Ecord.
we turned comments off on the Wiki because it was not a place people were effectively using for collaborative work. It was more like, I mean, clearly Wiki pages are editable, but it wasn't a dynamic collaboration.
Okay, noted, yeah.
So
we can go to Slack and do that, right?
I mean, we tend to go to Google Docs for that, but which we could do here. I mean, if once it's on the Wiki, then the best way to comment on it would be to start up an email dialogue. Although it's hard for more than one, for multiple parties to then come in and do edits. I mean, if you agreed that I'll take this section and you have that section, that's fine. But it just is not proven to be a great dynamic collaborative environment.
We also have the Slack that we can people can start asking questions from one another if make sure that everyone is on Slack.
Yeah, so email and Slack are great places to post comments about what's there and to have discussions about. It's harder to do it in a linked comment. I'm talking about this line, and it's harder to coordinate multiple edits.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Okay, so right.
Okay, that's good.
It's Alex. So one question probably for Bora, because I see that you schedule a meeting with for open config. So if you can just provide maybe a couple of minute overview of that. So what's the intent? Is it just to familiarize with the what open config does, or is it more opportunistic to see how can we take some of the work that open config does, especially on the event standardization, and how can we do that within Cord as well?
Yeah, that one is actually being handled by Santia. Santia is organizing that meeting.
But I think the point is the gRPC is what I think we are already using it for some of the work, and more we need to explore it to see where we can take advantage of gRPC here, as an interface. I don't know. Maybe Larry can add to that as well, but definitely, we want to take advantage of gRPC or OpenConfig for describing the collectors or, or creating the APIs in a dynamic way, if all possible. Describing the collectors in Yang maybe, which is part of OpenConfig, I believe.
So the main idea is to have learn how Google is doing things and try to
take advantage.
Yeah, take advantage of if you find anything useful.
I think they're using gRPC as well here. A
couple of people. gRPC isn't a panacea, but I do agree that standardizing around collector framework interfaces is absolutely a good thing. So, I mean, one way to look at this is that there is a collector plugin interface, so to speak, currently. And I think the way that you could think of it working is that each thing that you plug in has its own interface to the remote things it's pulling data from. And then the plugin is running locally. So you can discuss this issue in the context of what's there and saying, this is what we want to standardize. Well, A, understand what's there now, and B, this is the way we'd like to evolve it and what we're working towards.
Yes, okay. No, that's a good advice, Larry. Thanks. Was it Alex who was asking the question?
Yes, it was. And that's the level of detail I was after. So thanks.
Yeah, sure. I'll send you some stuff, Alex, all the stuff, material that at least I have on gRPC in case you don't have it. So, and I think we have some presentation from Google and all that we can share with you. And if you want to expand on that, that'd be great.
Now, on the OpenConfig side, that's a slightly different matter. My interpretation, maybe I'm missing something, which is OpenConfig, you come in from, again, in Cord speak, you would come in through Cord's northbound interface with an OpenConfig-like specification of what you wanted. I don't know that would translate then to the internal gRPC calls that are going on.
Yeah, that was my impression, Larry, but I need to go double check.
I mean, they're both Google related, but I'm not sure that they're strongly connected issues.
Okay.
Are we looking at it for the northbound or the southbound?
Well, so that's a good question, and on this point, it would be really interesting to. And again, I cannot remember the specification, but there was a ONAP or had a specification, a format of some kind for monitoring data, for probes that were being delivered.
Okay, so possibly looking at how to map it through, because OpenConfig also defines GNMI, and so as part of that, you can create subscriptions or subscribe to events. And so you can get changes in state from the underlying system.
So OpenConfig has allowances for that?
Yes, as part of GNMI.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thanks.
So I have a question for David, maybe if you can hear us, in terms of, some of the access and some of the hardware specific or acceleration that they might have some counters and registers, and, if they probably have some drivers or APIs that we can tie to, right, for collecting certain information from access points. I'm wondering, if that's that's something that we should go ahead on now, or we just should make the assumption that whoever brings a collector in an embedded form, they would also bring their drivers, and we just call those APIs. Or can we reverse it, where we define the APIs and we tell them to you need to adhere to these kind of APIs, or something of some sort.
Is that to me, David, or a different David?
David Bainbridge.
Okay. I think when you talk about collectors, you're going to start getting into data formats. And what's going to be important in terms of APIs is what's the data format that something must send in order that something else can process data from several different sources. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, look, if you are going to provide a collector, here is the data format in which it must be sent. And it's up to the person writing the collector to go from a native format to this common format.
I see, I see. So they can write their own additional drivers that maps to whatever they have to our format.
Right. I think that's perfectly reasonable to say that that's the adaptation layer that needs to be managed.
Adaptation layer. Okay, so we could potentially define data formats for these different loops as well, too, kind of, or example data formats that at least we can start with.
I would think so, yeah. Yeah. The other issue is always too, you have to look at what you're processing and how you're processing the data, because having collectors send data that something doesn't process or use or store is kind of pointless too, right?
Exactly.
So there is this kind of this relationship between the producer and the consumer, even if it's a weak relationship, right? And that has to be looked at and maintained.
Yes, yes, and that's good advice, David. No, thanks. Yeah. So I'm sort of used to, in the world that there are a lot of embedded hardware or chipsets that they have their own control registers and collect, or that are collecting information, or somebody needs to go pull these counters and reset the counters.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out, how do we, if there are, let's say, a bunch of counters associated with some entity or some chip or some hardware or some software or VNF, how do we basically map those counters to our, data collector for loop 0, loop 1, or 2, or 3?
Yeah, I think you absolutely want to abstract that kind of device specifics away as close to the device as possible.
Yes, yes. Abstraction. Okay. Great. Well, thanks for that, David.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else, Bodo?
Yeah, I think that's all from my part.
Great. So, Larry, anything else for us? I think we can probably, we have a few action items to cover for next week, and including bringing the team together.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything else.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right, thanks everyone. I'll close it down.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks.